I'm going to give you our framework for how we get from start of the school year to trying to get a teacher to be embracing these things. And we are taking a growth mindset. We do not have like saying, this is exactly where you're going to be. So you're going to see that there is flexibility built into the system. Okay, so we have lots of graphics our coaching subcommittee has created to try to demonstrate this process. Not the most friendly thing, but I want to just highlight a couple of really key principles. This is kind of an overarching kind of process from getting from start to finish, and then I'm going to go like month by month timeline, which has some flexibility. So the first thing that we all want to know as good coaches that we want to build into our system is that there's going to be a period in coaching that is focused on knowledge and relationship building. We don't want to jump in on day one and say, okay, give me Eureka lesson plans. We're going to be changing X, Y, and Z. That's not going to be a beneficial relationship for anyone. So we're going to make sure this was identified by our coaching subcommittee that we have opportunities for establishing a relationship with your teacher at the beginning of your coaching process with them. So things we're going to be doing is that we need to make sure that they get some foundational knowledge about APL, kind of like what we did yesterday, where we just said, what is the what of APL? We need to make sure that we allocate time to understand the teachers and the classroom's current strengths. So we are taking a strength-based approach, as well as what do they need? We're not going to assume what they need. We're going to work with teachers to identify the needs of their classrooms and how does that align with their strengths. We need to gather some information about their preferences and perceptions about these concepts. How do they feel about the importance of agency? Are they scared by agency? I know I am. When I relinquish control, that can be scary, right? Like, it's nice when they're all compliant, like it's the kindergarten cop model, right? But is it what we want? So we need to get some background information about how do they feel about these concepts. And then we need to align this with what are their goals for coaching. So that's that goal setting is extremely important to us. And I will say we'll share all these PowerPoint presentations afterwards so that we can do it. So we need to give time for that foundational relationship knowledge. So then the tier 2, which is the second kind of our RTI kind of response to intervention treatment here, is the heart of what we're doing. This is the majority of our time in APL, and our avenue for getting to APL is this integration of these pillars into our math lesson plans. So this is all this stuff in the middle is redundant from yesterday, right? We're going to do these things, and we're going to support these teaching strategies. We're going to use that sheet that's got that one pager of all these ways in which we can incorporate APL by doing small groups or supporting social and emotional development. That's our middle tier of where we're wanting to go. But math is not our endpoint. Math is our vehicle. So depending on your teacher, you might see that, okay, they're getting it with this idea of like integration into math. They're getting bored with these ideas of ways in which I can infuse APL into my math lessons. I want to do that project. I want to do that thing that spans the science and the social studies, because we're going to go for a walk around our neighborhood and we're going to measure the buildings. We're going to do city planning on our own. We're going to talk about why do we need a fire station in it. Like I could think about building it and transforming it to an experience that transcends content. So we do want to work towards that idea of transfer and extension within this, but our main vehicle is this idea of integration of APL into lesson plans. So some general principles, again, we're trying to move from this idea of starting a relationship, really working into the integration, but then ultimately trying to move towards that idea of content area. But the pathway there is not going to look the same for every teacher, and nor should it. So another great graphic, which didn't show up, it's supposed to like roll out over time. Like, okay, well anyway, none of my graphics are working well. I'm going to blame the PC to Mac conversion and just say that's it, right? Okay, so ignore everything from here over. It was supposed to lovely appear on the click. So just let's focus on the first piece. So we're saying this first piece is the foundation setting piece. So maybe I'll start this in September. I might start this in December, depending on when we roll out with the pilots. But ideally, I put months there just so that I can have it as a point of reference. But no, when this happens might look different. Your school district's like, actually, no, we start PD in a month before the start of school. You might be doing that kind of things there. But we have certain pieces of that we want to establish ahead of time. And I'll walk you through what each of these components are. And I'll say for each of these components, this is going to be the buzzword of this session is there's a form for that or there's a resource for that. So each piece has been strategically aligned with some way to document this process. But generally what you're going to see is that once you start going through this initial foundation building, relationship building with your teacher, they're going to set a goal. And we're going to have Sophia and Taylor, who I've been just calling Sophia out on that yesterday, sorry Taylor, you're going to set a goal. And then you're going to engage in this kind of bi-weekly coaching cycle. When you set a goal, this is probably something you're hoping to achieve in a month, maybe 2 months. By the time I'm done, let's say my thing is I want to be better at implementing self-sustaining centers for students so that I can actually have them working independently. That's not something I might do overnight. This might be something that I'm going to be working with my coach for a month, 2 months to really feel comfortable with it. I might have thought it was going to take me 2 months and it ended up, I am just that amazing that I got it done after 2 coaching cycles, and we can speed this up. So we say that a coaching cycle, these 2-week cycles, there's probably about 4 of them. Like if you think it's going to take 2 months to complete something, you're going to be visiting that classroom probably 4 times over that 2-month period because you go out every 2 months. But a 2-week cycle is not a moment or a day. A 2-week cycle has a process where I'm planning a lesson enhancement with my teachers, like we did today. I am then going in and doing an observation. I'm reflecting with that teacher in that observation, and then that process starts all over again. So you're probably going to, within any goal, do this process up to 4 times, if not more, because it's going to all depend on you and your teacher to say, we're ready to move on. We feel comfortable we've achieved our goal. And then that process stops. So Kim has done really well. She's actually good at creating self-sustaining centers. Her coach helped her set up ways in which we can do easy tabletop activities where kids could actually reach the materials themselves and put it out on the table. Oh, I know how to play the car racing game. I can do that on my own. I'm getting good at this, right? So then we move on to the next one. Well, next one Kim wants to work on is I want to make my learning more meaningful. How can I do the very thing that you guys were doing for Sophia? So now I set my new goal. And then we go through that process over and over again. So this is a generic timeline for the average teacher, whatever it would look like. But I hope you can see that this is a cyclical process, and it builds over time. So let's break this down in its individual components. So foundational knowledge and relationship building. So this is that bottom tier of our triangle. So the first things, our aim in this cycle is to understand teachers' perceptions and preferences in our APL, and we've got a way to do that. We're going to try to understand teachers and their current strengths and needs. We're going to provide that foundational knowledge about APL, and then we're going to identify their goals. So some of the things we're going to do, the first step here, is we're going to give every teacher a pre-survey. So this is actually for those that are getting APL coaching and those that won't. So it looks like this. This is a snapshot of that. We're also going to get demographic information and all that. But we were going to have every teacher complete a short survey, should take less than 15 minutes, where they're going to give us some information. So we're going to ask them questions like, how much of your day do your students typically work alone or with peers and choose tasks freely? So this is analogous to how much time do you have for centers in your day? So then we have questions about the principles of APL, like how important do you think the following are? So this is question 2, children connecting learning to their lives inside and outside the classroom. So we're going to gather information to have some baseline for you as a coach to know, oh, if she's really thinks meaningful is really important and she feels really confident in that, that's probably something we're not going to be coaching much about. Maybe we will. Maybe that's the thing they want to work on first. So we're going to gather, and this is also a data collection tool for the evaluation, but we're going to gather that. So this is something that I encourage everybody, if you have some time today, we're running short on time, so we're not going to do it as a group today, but look through this. I really want to look to my coaches in particular to say, is this information going to be helpful for you? Like, what do you want to know? And I in particular say that on the last page because we have some questions in there about what are their preferences for communication? Do you want us to have a shared Google Doc? My school uses Google. If we're going to do anything, can you put it in a Google Doc? Or I actually do not like phone calls. I hate phone calls. I'm a millennial, and I don't know if my phone rings, I freak out, which honestly mine does too. I'm like, oh God, who died? But I want you to text me. So we want to gather that kind of information that's important. We also want any important information about what's happening in that school. Hopefully we'll have some of this background because we're collaborating with schools, but it might be that my school's now also implementing a new social and emotional curriculum, and that might be something that I want to dovetail with the meaningful piece. So hopefully we'll have some of this, but that pre-survey is all about to gather that initial information. So one prompt for me to you is, this is one of those forms. Anytime I put something in blue and I underline it, this is a form, right? So this is something that they're going to complete. So if you have an opportunity to review that or make any suggestions here today or offline, we would love to hear it, because these are all open documents that we are currently constructing. I do ask, because we have to do an IRB modification, if you can get our feedback within the next week, I would greatly appreciate it, because then it's going to have to go into like the procedures of what it means to run a research study. Okay, so that's one thing we're going to do. I'm like setting things down everywhere. Okay, so now we've got some information about the teacher. So you're going in, you're not blind, you know a little bit about this teacher. Then we are going to be working with your teachers to give them some foundational knowledge. Okay, finally. So with this, that's exactly what we're doing here. We're going to go into the work with the school district to provide some background, initial content on APL. It's just enough to be able to initiate the coaching process. So I know we've got our dates scheduled with Skokie. I'm very excited for that in October and in September. So we will be going out, and theirs actually is going to look a little bit different than maybe yours, because they are doing it, we get two-hour sessions, and we're going to maybe have to do some stuff asynchronously, but APL will work with that district to say, how do we get the content to you? So what you're going to do is we'll deliver this in collaboration with you. The site coaches will work with the APL staff that is running this workshop today to do these initial workshops with sites and the central coaches. And this is an opportunity for site coaches and teachers to work with their own district's math curriculum and the broad pedagogical approach. So it's going to look very similar to what you're doing today. So initial ground setting, we've got this foundational workshop, and then you're going to do some initial coaching visits. So the aim of these initial coaching visits is to gather initial information about the classroom and to begin to identify possible goals of coaching. We expect you might do one, you're probably going to do two of these kind of visits, which is just going out with, I want to know who your teachers are, I want to know who you are, and I want to know about your students. So this is going to be about a 1-hour visit. You'll go into the classroom. You're just going to see how things, you'll schedule it with your teacher, and then you're going to have about a 30-minute time for reflection, where you're like asking the teacher, trying to get some initial goals. They should have had some foundational content from the workshops, so you can start having and building a conversation and a dialogue with your teacher. So this is a form. So there is another form in your packet. Vanna, Miss Dr. Vanna White, we have a form for you to complete this. This is very open-ended form. And so again, with any other form, we ask you after the fact if you want to review it, but you're going to see this is basically open-ended prompts. Like, so what strengths did you see? So that's what is working. What is there to work on? This is just initial notes for you as a coach. We do ask you to complete this though, because this is your documentation for us. So again, what helpful information is missing? So after you've gathered this information, you've built a strong foundation with your teacher, we can finally get into the process of setting an initial goal. And so here you're going to work with your teacher to identify, plan, and document a teacher's goal for incorporating APL. I'm not going to go over this form because that's what Sophia and Taylor are going to do. They're going to go over this form with you, and it is a form. But this is where we're going to document on what is it that you want to work on. What pillars is that aligned with? And they're going to talk about that whole process. So now I've got a goal. I understand, I'm hopefully about a month and a half into this process. I understand my teacher. I understand their classroom a little bit better. We've actually built a relationship of trust, or at least starting to. And now I'm going to say, what do you want to work on? So now we've set a goal. And now we're going to go into this 2-week cycle. And so this is the idea. Through these multiple 2-week iterative cycles, teachers and coaches will work to meet those curriculum goals of a lesson. So you're going to do what Debbie did with us, where we're going to be doing some co-constructing opportunities offline, most likely, where we're integrating curriculum into lesson plans, so using all those resources. So we had the one-pager with the ideas. We had the student behavior continuum, which is the rubric-looking thing that's not a rubric, but just a discussion point. And then we had the lesson planning template that Debbie created. So these are all resources. These aren't forms. These are all resources for you to support that relationship. So we've enhanced some lessons. We've most likely done this offline, and then I'm going to come in and do a visit. And I'm going to observe. So I'm going to visit the classroom for probably about an hour, maybe 45 minutes. You schedule that with your teacher, and you're going to visit, and here our main goal is coaching. This is where you do the very thing that you are, as coaches, are trained to do. I'm going to identify an opportunity to do an enhancement in the meeting. I might have a teacher who actually gets trusting with Renee and is like, hey, can you come in and demonstrate and model this for me? That's your first goal, is the coaching goal. We will have some time to, so we really want you, when you do that, it is observation and documentation, but it is a coaching visit. So for sake of time, I was going to have this nice open-ended question, but think to yourself, what real-time coaching strategies might you use to support teachers as they seek to implement APL? I think this should be an offline conversation. If we can make notes somewhere, that let's gather the coaches back together and let's address this question, because I want to build on the strengths of the coaches in the room about what strategies have worked for you to actually help teachers start to adopt practices that are important. So you're going to do this, and you, in this process, Molly's going to talk about this. I think this is my next one, is the second aim is to do some documentation and observation. So we do need you, this is a requirement, a form, is that you are going to capture some information for us about what was happening and what was going well. And this is not to be evaluative towards the teacher at all. This is just to be able to document and see growth. And it's also going to be a great tool for you to say, yeah, we've made progress towards that goal, and I feel good about this. Maybe we need to move on to the next thing. So each time you go out for a visit, your primary focus is enhancing that experience, but you will also be doing this live coaching observation form. I'm not going to go over this today either, because Molly's going to do a session with us on this form in a second. Well, and after, in a few seconds. Okay, so then I've designed some lesson plans, I've done an observation, I need to have time for reflection. So an observation is about an hour, and then you're going to want to dedicate about 30 minutes for a reflection. We're flexible in how this reflection happens. We need to know that it's happening. It might be text message thread, online, let's go meet and have a Zoom session because I can't do it, or you just happen to come right before I have a lunch break, so let's now take 30 minutes over your lunch break and have a conversation. Again, we're having to give you the agency as coaches to be able to decide how that unfolds. But what's important is that within that live coaching observation form, we want you to use that information to highlight for the teacher. These are your qualitative comments back to the teacher. What went well? What are things we might want to work on? And what do I need to do to support you? So this kind of becomes that documentation and contract with your coach. So you're going to do that for every time you go out for one of these 2-week cycles. You're going to engage in these 3 processes of lesson planning, actually going out to the classroom and observing and giving feedback, and then doing this planning and reflection. So if I feel like I've gotten to the point where we're like, we've got this one hammered, we're ready to move on, we don't need to stick with this goal anymore, let's do the next thing, right? So we're going to go through this. There's even more things. I'm going to go ahead and click ahead. We're at this decision point. So anytime you complete a 2-week cycle, you're probably going to just take a moment and say, do we want to keep focusing on this current goal, or am I going to set a new goal? So if I choose path 1, we're going to just keep going through that cycle over again until we hit the point where we're ready to set a new goal. So then there's a form, I promise you're going to get sick of this, where we go into this, where we're going to document reflections on that initial goal, and Sophia and Taylor will describe that form for you in the right as soon as I'm done talking this time. But this is the idea of like taking a step back and reflecting on the bigger goal. It's not about how did this lesson go, how did this observation go, but really about your growth over the period of these multiple iterations. So over the last month, over the last 2 months, how did it look towards the goal we're making? So you'll fill out the planning reflection form as part of that. So this goes hand in hand with your initial goal setting. And then you start the process all over again, right? And so then this is essentially all you're going to do over and over again for the rest of your life. No, not true. So I hope this just gives us, I'm going to go back to this, a little bit of observation, like that kind of mile-high view of what we're expecting. I will raise the concern that came before, is that this process, this little 2-week unpacking, that is huge. There's so much within, like, it looks nice. It's this little, like, word art, right? Good job. No, it's a lot more than that. And there is a lot of concern about what is the time commitment on a teacher to, like, how much time can we dedicate to planning? How much time are we going to dedicate to that observation? And how much time do we have to dedicate to that reflection? All three of those pieces are essential, right? And you might have one teacher that's like, you know what? I've got this planning period and I really want to spend all hour of this planning period. Can you zoom in with me? And we do that. And you might have another teacher that's like, oh, I'm going to shoot you a text. This is what I'm going to do to APL my lesson plan. We want to accept all kinds. We want to meet teachers where they are. We need to document what that process looked like. And trust me, there's a form for that. Teachers will be completing a weekly log for us. This isn't something you have to do, but giving us insights into what are they doing towards coaching. How much are they APLifying lesson plans? Where are they finding struggles? How are they actually using you as a coach to support them? So I really want us to take time, and like I said, as a parking lot idea, I'd like us, for sake of limitations and time today, coaches, I'm going to challenge you to think about, like, if we were to unpack that 2 weeks, what are we missing? What do we really need to give you space to be able to do this effectively? Because I know that we're not nearly there yet. And I think the more structure we put on, how do we also build in the autonomy that you need with your teachers in order to reach these goals?